I'm going to talk about the steps for Canadian PFAS and plastics registry. So I'm going to be very specific. I'm going to use an example company, whether they know it or not, completely based on public information. So nothing here is proprietary. We actually don't know anything on the inside. So I'm going to use it from public information because it gives you also the ability to double check the work a little bit. Some of it is, there's going to be some parts where theorized, but basically this is from a lot of experience. We'd rather use something that everybody else can look up on the web and be able to understand or internalize what's going on. So I'm Bruce Calder, the VP of Consulting Service here today. This is going to be very practical. It may not go the direction you would think for each of these things. So I'm going to talk about Canadian PFAS and the Canadian Plastics Registry. So first off, I'm going to start Canadian PFAS. I'm going to do a brief summary because not that you haven't heard, okay, this is the Section 71 notice. I'm going to talk about the salient bits that influence the next pieces. Now, I'm going to have some keynotes. The keynotes are really important. So before people get down the wrong path, some keynotes. Just to reiterate the scope summary, and then I'm going to take an example company. I'm going to walk through it. I'm going to show you step one, how now Canada PFAS, the Section 71 survey. We've been doing Section 71 surveys for years. We probably do way more than anyone else. We do, this year is going to have a lot of them. Most time we do Section 71s, they're pretty obscure chemicals. Last year we did 20 or 30. This year probably do a couple hundred. It's a lot more people have PFAS than vegetable oil in their products, which is the main one for last Section 71. We usually start with a questionnaire, and I'll explain that. To not try to boil the ocean, go down a functional direction. Actions. So what actions come out of the questionnaire and the actual reporting? You're like, well, where's the big data gathering? Look at the actions. When we get to the actions, we're much more specific. We don't like to boil the ocean just for the excitement of boiling the ocean. We like to, you're not doing this for fun. We kind of do this for fun. By looking at the reporting, you create the report. We decided it's a great, wonderful technical conversation for the past hour on PFAS. And each time I try to steer them back is like, look at what you're reporting before you get too caught up in whatever direction you want to go and all these complexities. Don't make life difficult for yourself off the bat. Start with what do you have to report, what you're actually going to put in there. Work your way backwards. Then I'm going to do the Canadian Plastics Registry. I'm going to do an example company. This one's going to be really, really specific. And I got some keynotes off the bat. The notes are very important. And I'm going to talk about the old-fashioned way you do something in the Plastics Registry. And I'm going to talk the better way to do it. If you want to spend like tons of money, go ahead, do the old-fashioned way. You're going to be really frustrated by the end, and it's going to cost a lot. So the better way is how do you get to the answer? We always try to look, what's the answer? How do we create the best answer for the least effort? And then I'm going to have an example company. I'm going to walk through it. It's all based on public information, so nothing's internal, but it's real enough that people can follow along and internalize it. And we'll do some Q&A. And at this point in time, there should be an image on the right, which is very marketing or something like that. I didn't include that. One of the challenges of being a chemist, sometimes I forget about like the marketing stuff. And I remember like, oh yeah, it's a fluoroether. It's 2 carbon fluorines and oxygen, 2 more carbon fluorines. Really exciting for me. Marketing picture may not make the cut every time. Marketing guys are probably having slight crying in their hands right now. Anywho, the Canadian PFAS reporting is a mandatory data gathering under Section 71 of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. These happen every year. You might not know they happen every year, but they happen every year. They can happen more often than every year, but they generally happen every year. The mandatory notices, we've been doing these for years. Last one was 300 plus chemicals. This one's PFAS, which is 300 plus chemicals. And the next one is going to be a whole different, slightly unknown list of 300 chemicals. Now it's about 7 months away. Okay, so this is importers and manufacturers of very specific PFAS. It's not like PFAS. It's not like the US TSCA, which is all PFAS, and people have this, esoteric religious discussion of how many carbon fluorines are PFAS. This is a specific list. And you might say, hey, it's 300. It's got to be all the PFAS. Like, no, not really. It's missing most of the important ones, actually. Kind of funny. Probably some of the most commonly used PFASs are not actually reportable here, and that'll come up later. So it's in chemicals and physical products, articles. They call them manufactured items, articles. So whether you import like a lubricant chemicals or a physical product like a computer or a pump or an endoscope or something like that, you're in scope, but it's only for specific PFAS. It's a positive list. So it's not like the US TSCA, which is all PFAS. Anything you think of PFAS, do report it. This is a positive list. Actually, 3 positive lists. And it's due January 29th, 2025. You get it by a 3-month extension. Some companies are trying to ask for, associations are trying to ask for a year. That's funny. It basically means you haven't even looked at the output. Again, look at the output first before you start. Again, and if the sky isn't falling, nobody's going to pay their association anyways. So sky's always falling, but it's technically complicated to a certain extent. But once you actually figure out what you're reporting, there's work to be done, but don't go boil the ocean. It's not, you'll see. Okay. So Canada, again, has 3 lists of specific PFAS. It's not all PFAS. It's unlike US TSCA report. List 1, part 1, is you have to report if you have over 10 grams of reportable PFAS in list 1, and they're mostly liquids and salts. They're mostly like what used to be in cosmetics until 2021. It still is a little bit, and certain lubricants. And those have a 10-gram reporting limit. And those are actually a bit of a nightmare for physical products, guys, because generally the reporting limit is super high, except for some of your lubricants where it's 10 grams. It's like 1/5 of a toothpaste tube, which you easily go over in your lubricants. So list 1 is a bunch of liquids and salts, basically. List 2 and 3, part 2 and 3 of the notice, are basically, you have to report if you have over 100 kilograms of that. And they're mostly fluoropolymers or fluoroethers. Fluoroethers are, think of it mostly as refrigerants. It's not quite true. Or fluoropolymers. Fluoropolymers like PTFE and fluoroelastomers like FKM. If you're over 100 kilograms, which is a lot. This is an early question, so I'm just going to double check on an early question just in case I have some audio problem or something like that. Oh, perfect. Yeah, so this Canadian PFAS, great questions. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to submit it. I'll get to all of them at the end. Nope, it's not. I just put the questions up in the other one just in case there's a volume or that kind of thing. So the list 2 and 3 report about 100 kilograms, which is very different than 10 grams. 10 grams is not a lot. 100 kilograms is quite a bit. And that's like if your ETFE wire or your PTFE gasket or your, RC318 refrigerant. So it's quite high. Why is there ore in there? It doesn't need to be there. I'll have to get rid of the ore in the final version. Not sure why that's there. Mostly because I think I had this in different order originally, but part 1 is the 10 grams, and then part 2 and 3 are the 100 kilograms, which is quite different. So you can do it. You PFAS reported. There is a burdensome approach where a lot of companies go wrong. I don't know how many conversations we have in these, going down these huge details. I'm like, look at the output first. Walk backwards. Okay, they create a complicated plan to gather data for all companies and all parts, from all suppliers and all parts. Sure. Then they review the reportable chemicals and outputs afterwards, at which point they usually have to restart or have to redo so much of it because they didn't realize exactly what they're trying to do in the first place. Start with the output. Don't go, hey, and of course, there's a lot of people in our industry saying, hey, we're a service provider. Here's our new tool or whatever to gather all the data. Slow down. Just look at the output first. I mean, you can spend a lot of money, and that's fair. It's your money. And then you have to redo it again at the end. Or there's a better way to do it. Now, the way they do it is technical, and you'll need technical help. The way to shortcut a lot of it is knowing things. Knowledge is useful. So what we always do for all Section 71s, because they're always positive lists, doing this for years, we review the chemicals in scope. Before we all go in this path, and we know that not all the PFAS are here, why don't we actually look at what's here? And sure, this is chemistry-ish. There's 300 plus chemicals, so it's not for everybody. But thing is, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to review the chemicals in scope. But we work for so many companies. When you work with us, you only pay this small portion of the work. Do these chemicals apply to your products? Like, here are all the chemicals. Do they really apply to you? And can they possibly be in your products at a reportable level? Sure, it could be there. Will it ever get to 100 kilograms? No. In some cases, yes, but in some cases, absolutely not. Not that chemical in that application. It's technical. Most companies do not have chemists available with the necessary information. That's true. It makes it a lot easier to work with us. Yes, you have to spend some money in the outside world, but it saves you so much time and money. Most companies don't have chemists available for this. We do. We have quite a few chemists. We also have a lot of non-chemists. Actually, our manager of operations has a PhD in ancient Greek literature from Oxford. He's a polymath, though. Polymaths are really useful people. You might have to Google that. Definitely recommend those. This is how we start every Canada notice. Okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves, especially when we do this for so many companies. Let's actually figure out what we're doing first, instead of like, finding out how to drive the car once we're in it, going down the road. So that's how we start everywhere. We review the chemicals. What are they? And a lot of them, the name that Canada calls it is not the name you normally call it. So it's also translation. And the effort or cost of the work is spread over our larger client base. So it makes it, you get a lot more for a lot less cost. It's really nice. So we start with the questionnaire. We do this for everything. Last one is basically came down to a variety of questions about what you have that's UV stabilized or outdoor rated, and use any vegetable oil, because it comes down to the main chemical to report was hexadecanoic acid, which is a byproduct of vegetable oil and palm oil and all the oils. So for a lot of companies, it came down to, do you use food oils? No. Awesome. We could have done a lot more work and surveyed your entire supplier base for 300 plus chemicals. Or after asking a couple questions, we distilled it down to, are you using vegetable oil? No. All right, moving on. And you do a declaration of non-engagement. Basically, I did the work, but I have nothing to report. So step one, we have simplified the project start with a series of questions. These are like yes, no, and unknown. Unknown's an answer. And they seem always so, well, most of them wildly obscure. But there's a reason for it. Because there's certain things that are not going to be a problem in certain situations. Like, do you import any articles such as electronics or chairs? Yes. Do you do over 100,000 of them a year? No. That actually limits the number of PFAS that can make the 100 kilogram limit. It's actually important. So you have electronics. There are things we're going to have to do, and there's more questions about electronics. There's a question on later. Do you import electronics? Yes. Do you import over 1,000 electronics a year? Yes. Okay. That changes things a bit. And then every single one of these has a work action related to it. Instead of boiling the ocean, we focus on what's relevant to your reporting. You go, no, I don't have to go down that stream. You go, yes, we have a pathway for that. There is a work path for that. And yes, there's work to do. And electronics have more work than most products to do. But the work, we can simplify the work paths. Depending on the product type and the volumes, the work path changes. It doesn't mean you still don't have to do work. It's just the amount of work, the level of work decreases. And then what work we're doing, we know exactly what we're going to be working on. So we always start with a questionnaire for section 71, because they're always positive lists. So instead of worrying about, this metaphorical religious question, what's PFAS? We actually go, okay. And there's a whole pile of questions we go through. And based on it, it defines the work product. So there's a lot of work that goes into making this. It's a tremendous amount of work, like huge amount of work. However, we do it so much, you get to benefit from everyone else, which is great. Okay, now the next couple of slides are we do the action steps. We're gonna do the steps for an example company. We know zero about what's going on inside this company. We're doing it all, by the way, from public information. Notes, tangible is better. So we're gonna use somebody tangible that everybody would recognize, based completely on publicly available information. And especially in the plastic registry, you'll see that. And there are some reasonable estimates for example purposes, but anything here is just public information or estimates. We add some assumptions for examples and processes. So we're like, hey, we say out of the action, it's kind of reasonable that this was likely one of the answers. So let's just follow that path. So we did, for some cases, invent reasonable answers, which will likely be possible for this company, but we don't really know anything that's going on inside. So we're going to take IKEA, all public information. They have good actual public materials data. It's available online. Their stuff's very accessible to double check your work, and they're very tangible to a wider audience. We can talk about things. It's actually amazing the variety of stuff they have. We can talk about things that people recognize or understand. And they have some complexity. The fact that, you make industrial machinery, they have like refrigerators. They have things that are comparable. And then they have textiles and then frying pans and bits of everything. So they're a really good example. This is all done from public. So imagine Then we did, okay, step one, let's do their questionnaire. So we're going to answer this question reasonably based on public information. These are the yeses and nos. Sweet. Out of that, they have actions. They have high volume electronics. They have lamps and refrigerators and air purifiers and a bunch of other stuff. I'm assuming they do a reasonable volume, especially of lamps. Textiles, they have oven mitts, but they also have like carpets and lots of other blinds and other textiles. They have PTFE coated cookware. It says Teflon right on it, which, by the way, is way safer than most of the other options. Teflon doesn't contain nor create the PFAS that are found in drinking water. They're blamed for it all the time by journalists, which generally didn't become journalists by being chemists first or physicists or really anything in the science field. Teflon is as related to the chemical that creates PFOA as oil is to vinegar. They have some things in common. They both have fluorines. Oil and vinegar have a few things in common, but they're quite different. The fluoroacrylics and such that create PFOA and similar are very different chemical than PTFE. They share some names. Oil and vinegar share a bunch of things, but they're quite different. So the Teflon in your pan is very different from the ones that create the PFOA. So they have Teflon pans, there's Teflon right on it. And they have outdoor furniture, which should be one of the questions. And they have food containers, which is related to another pathway. And all of these, say 5 situations, they might have 6 or 7 in reality, will have, for us, an action path. So we usually distill it down. We're working on certain things. And you're going, well, this is a lot of stuff. Yes, the work is partially filtered. Electronics have more work than others to what is relevant to that. Because we've done the list of chemicals. We're working on something very specific from textiles. So then we take up some actions. And I'll show the action. So stage 2 is really doing action. So high volume electronics, refrigerators, air purifiers, they have a bunch of neat stuff actually. So we have to do additional investigation. There's work to do. We have a process mapping for electronics and PFAS, especially from bill of materials. We have a lot of test capability if the product's really simple. Their actions need to happen. So high volume electronics, their actions, but to make the 100 kilograms, limit or the 10 gram for certain things, it really simplifies what we're looking for. There only are a certain number of things that can meet that volume. And you'll see when you get to the Teflon pans, the kind of volume you need. So a Teflon pan, and we'll get to that section, 12-inch Teflon pan. The Teflon, everybody's like, well, that's a lot of Teflon. It's about 2 mils thick Teflon, 2/1000 of an inch, which over a 12-inch pan based on the density of Teflon is about 10 grams. So it's 10 grams per 12-inch pan, which is a decent sized pan. So that means to make the 100 kilogram limit, they need to sell 10,000 pans a year, which they might. We'll say they do for the this discussion. However, it gives you an idea from electronics, like, wait a minute, Teflon pans need to sell 10,000. Yes, you're getting the idea that there's only certain things that'll meet the 100 kilograms. So there's work that needs to be done, a lot less than US Tosca. Tosca's got a lot more going. Their actions need to be completed, and high volume electronics have, and that's one of the reasons we ask the volumes, because the volumes do change the component types of interest. So it takes more work than most PFAS. The electronics, the sorting through the problem is more work than the others. And there are a lot of straightforward processes for that. And that's a longer discussion. But it's really focused for us because we're just doing high volume. Now, now this is high volume. Imagine your low volume electronics. Awesome, simpler work plan. We're only looking for a couple things. And to be there, they have to be there a lot. So at the end, we're going to say, based on what they're selling, chances are the most likely reportable situation is a couple of them actually, but we'll say the most likely one is PTFE is an anti-drip. So ABS, when it burns, it drips. It can't be in a fire zone, a UL 94 V0 zone if it drips. So you add PTFE to the ABS. So when it burns, it doesn't drip, it webs. And it's maybe only 1 or 2% PTFE in the ABS. So it has to be big pieces of PTFE like fans and ABS lamp holders and stuff like that. So it has to be a fairly high volume. We're going to say they have enough volume that they're reporting PTFE is an anti-drip. And that's the reportable in parts 2 or 3 that comes out over 100 kilograms. There are some part 1, some substance we'll ask about. We're going to say in this case, they don't have them. It's unlikely they do. Machinery, yes. Consumer products, probably not. But there's a whole work plan. So we have an action plan. They'll say coming out of this, they have PTFE as an anti-drip. It's one of the situations which is not an unreasonable. They'll be above 100 kilograms of PTFE. And that's one of the chemicals on part 2 of the list. Now we take textiles, different. We have the additional investigation. They're going to have fluoroacrylic. Some are going to have fluoroacrylic coatings. And I think, publicly they've moved away from a lot of fluoroacrylics, but it looks like some of their tags, the ones with the funky names, still have fluoroacrylics on them, the product tags. How much is that? We can look at the volume. We have to do some actions. However, it's likely not a reportable situation. Most fluoroacrylics, not all, are not on the list. So we may do a little work to not only in volumes, but to isolate what fluoroacrylic cast number we'd use or number of them we use in the situation. And better than average chance, they're not on the positive list. Because most fluoroacrylics are not on part 1 list. They're not in, it's a big mistake. Most PFAS used on textiles and winter clothing are actually not on the list. Not all of them are missing. Most of them are missing. Probably the most highest volume ones. So the US EPA issued a test order for fluoroacrylic last week in the US. And it's a high volume fluoroacrylic. We want to know about safety. Super high volume. It's what's used for waterproof coating. Is it on the Canadian positive list? No. So a lot of the most common fluoroacrylics aren't there. Some are, most of them are not. So it's not on the positive list. You don't have to report it. But because you use a lot of it, we normally recommend they do a declaration of stakeholder interest, and the government recommends it. And we'll explain that process later. But it's basically saying you don't put it in the official reporting. You send it separately. It's a declaration of stakeholder interest saying you don't even have to say you use it. You say, hey, the textiles industry uses fluoroacrylic polymer, which has got an accession number. Just so you're aware. And so they know it's used in the industry and they don't regulate it without talking to you first. But you also identified, we've done the work. We don't have to report this. This is not, you didn't put it on your list, but it's the same family. So we're just going to put a declaration of stakeholder interest, which is optional, but strongly recommended because when it says you've done the work, but also it says, don't go regulate this thing without asking. So if you do a declaration of stakeholder interest, they normally have to do a socioeconomic impact before they could ever regulate that substance, which is kind of handy. And there's similar processes we'd actually be doing with the outdoor furniture because they generally have the same PFAS for the same reasons. They also have PTFE in some of the weatherproofed metal coatings, but the concentration to 100 kilograms would take a lot of volume. We'd take a look at the volumes, and then there's work to be done there. And food containers. We're actually more interested in paper food containers than plastic ones. So you have food containers, awesome. Do they have these materials? Yes or no? If they do, okay, you have materials like paper. Yes, you have paper. Fine. Okay, here's the question we have to handle. Okay, you're going to have this fluoroacrylic. Is that fluoroacrylic on the list? Probably not. Recommend a declaration of stakeholder interest, but you don't have to report. Anyway, this might be going fast for a lot of people. And a lot of people try to stay at the high level. There's a lot of detail. Almost no part of this is super complex, is super difficult or technically challenging. It's just a lot of details. So one advantage, we do so much, we work through most of the details more than once to a painful degree and create a process that worked for everybody. So out of the questionnaire, they would have had questions about outdoor furniture, about food containers, textiles. The actions related to the three of them are actually very similar. A slight different outdoor furniture. We'd also be looking at PTFE coatings in the weather-resistant metals. But when we start is how many do you sell? That amount? Okay, now we're in a section where we really care if we use it or not. If it's below that, you can't get to 100 kilograms anyways, don't worry about it. Other ones, we still said that PTFE cookware. Awesome. Additional investigation required. Okay, so the work we do is we calculate the match of PTFE. And as I said, it'd be 10 grams. So you need to sell 10,000. Well, let's assume it's a little heavier, or even over 5,000. Yes? Okay, there's something to be done. So they're likely reportable if they're over 5,000, definitely if they're over 10,000 pans. So we're going to say they have to report PTFE in food, cookware in this. I don't know their volumes. We're just going to make some assumptions here. If they're over 10,000 pans, it's pretty assured. Over 20,000, pretty guaranteed. We do a calculation, and the reporting is somewhat complicated because it's food contact. So at this point in time, through the questionnaire, some specific actions, and the actions are really focused. We weren't trying to boil the ocean and say, hey, electronics, you're just going to do full data gathering anyways. No, depending on the volume, we're only interested in a few things. So imagine they have to report PTFE is an anti-drip. We said that from the electronics. High volume electronics use PTFE as an anti-drip. We'll say it's not human contacting. They have simplified reporting. Honest to goodness, the reporting is appliances, PTFE, and that's it. And then their address and contact information. If it's not in the list of human contacting textiles, etc., children's, the reporting requirements are really low. PTFE is a pan coating, on the other hand, is food contacting. It has to have complex reporting. And we can help you with that. Everybody's like, oh, you have to know all this formulation thing. PTFE is about as pure substance as you can get. It comes down to whether it has PFOA contaminant in it. It's not allowed to, and it won't, but we can check for it. But that's it. Does it have a PFOA family contaminant in it? It shouldn't. It almost never does. Fry pans never do, but we can check for it. Otherwise, PTFE as a formulation is about as pure as you get. It's food contacting. You just have, now you have to math your volumes in. For the anti-drip, if it's not human contacting, you don't even have to do your volumes. It's like, well, you have to do your 2023 volumes. Only if it's in the list of food contacting, dermal contacting, oral, children's, etc. It's a small list. By the way, if you want to go into that scoping, we have previous webinars. We've kind of like jumped a bit ahead until like actually what you're doing. Instead of rehashing the entire rules, we're deep into like, this is what you're going to do, or what we do, or what we do. And PTFE a pan coating. It has complex reporting because it's food content. And there's just more fields. Are the fields more difficult? Yes. Are they that difficult for us? No. Kind of said that off the cuff, but PTFE is about as pure material as you get. And it's pretty easy to do. You know, it's funny, whenever we do like the spectrum test of PTFE, it's easy to see because there's nothing else in it. We get PVC, you get the stabilizer and the thermal stabilizer and the plasticizer and the filler and the antioxidant and just tons of random things in it. PTFE, you get PTFE. It's about as pure substance. Nothing else likes to stick in it. If you have PTFE in ABS, sure, but it's pure PTFE again. PTFE is about as pure material as you get. So that's their mandatory reporting. So they're going to have to fill in, we'll fill in the Excel sheet for them. There's the PTFE is an anti-drip in appliances. There'll be simplified reporting. The PTFE is a pan coating. It'll be complicated. Fluoroacrylics I mentioned aren't part of this because the fluoroacrylic they have, we're assuming it's true, the vast majority of the time is not in the positive list. You don't have to report it. But optionally, they probably report their fluoroacrylics and textiles. They're not a list of PFAS. They do a declaration of stakeholder interest. It's not in the reporting form. It's a separate thing. You don't even have to say you use it. It's up to them what to do in this case. This is all public stuff. But the recommendation we normally go is like, hey, you give them a letter. It's called the declaration of stakeholder interest outside of the normal reporting form. And identify that fluoroacrylics used in the textiles industry. You don't even say you use it. You say it's used in the textiles industry. It's an effective measure to ensure Canada is aware that PFAS is used in Canada, so they don't do something silly about it, and not to regulate without consultation. The second you say it's used, then they have to do socioeconomic type evaluations before they regulate, which really extends any timeline towards regulation of it. It's really handy. And you don't even have to commit that you use it. So if there's some Freedom of Information Act thing we do, Jeremy, you can say, you don't even say you have to use it. You can say literally the textiles industry uses it. In Canada, if the fluoroacrylics used are not in your positive list, just to make sure you're aware they exist. That's it. And that would be the Canadian PFAS reporting. It's a little bit simpler in TSCA. TSCA, it's also much simpler than people think. But what we're basically looking at is it's likely they have 2 or 3 mandatory reporting requirements after they do the questionnaire, the actions. So step 1, review the chemicals in scope. Do these chemicals apply to your products? Can they possibly be in your products at a reportable level? And sure, that's technical. We handle that. We start with a questionnaire and go from there. Step 2, you take actions based on the results of step 1. Saying, oh, we have, they have textiles and high volume electronics and outdoor furniture and frying pans. Awesome. Okay, here are the actions to take. Electronics have a little more than everything else, but depending on the volume of electronics, they have more or less to do. Lower the volume, there's less things we're concerned about. Or the answer is easier and easier. It's like, to have it, every one of your products has to have it in this material. Let's go look at that material. And if you don't have data on that one material, or your supplier doesn't have data on that one material or 2 materials, we can test it as part of the project. Like it's easier most of the time for us to just wheel it down the hallway and say yay or nay than worrying about going complicated back and forth with other people who may not understand the question. And this is based on the applicable substance and application. So we're looking at electronics. Depending on the volume, there's more or less substance we care about. High volume products we care about, and we get into more detail. And we pursue those smaller number of applicable situations, the lower volumes. So you make big, complicated laboratory equipment. Depending on your volumes, you may have less to do. And then based on what comes out of those actions, we complete the reporting. And it could be simple, it could be complex as warranted. Imagine a lot of people use ABS as an anti-drip. It's mostly going to be internal, which is not human contacting, not children's product, going to be a simple reporting. Complex reporting is that fry pan. If the PTFE is on the outside of the product, which is a bit rare, medical devices, PTFE tubing that lies on the patient, sure, it's thermal contact. They have to do complex reporting. PTFE is really easy complex reporting because it's about as pure substance as it gets. And then the complex reporting has sales volumes, the simple reporting does not. And then you optionally declare declarations of stakeholder interest, like those fluoroacrylics that aren't on the positive list, but you might want to mention your industry uses them so they don't get themselves regulated by accident. And if you end up with no reportables, which does happen actually, if you have no reportable or interest PFAS, you can do a declaration of non-engagement. So that's the other one to say, just to show you've done it, we've reviewed it, this is the work we've done, and we write down the work that was done. And we don't have any reportable PFAS. And you're done. They can checkbox, say, hey, this company has done the work, checkbox, but you don't have to submit a complicated Excel file in the system. It's a simple email. It's called a declaration of non-engagement. And that's if you don't actually meet the reporting requirements at the end of the day. So you can end up with simple reporting, complex reporting, you can have both, which are in an Excel sheet, which we can fill for you and just give it to you to submit. You could submit a declaration of stakeholder interest if you have a PFAS that's not reportable or not for one reason or another. You want to make them aware your industry uses it, whether you commit to using it or not. Or you have none of the above, and you could just do a declaration of non-engagement. You turn out at the end of the day, you have no reportable PFAS. You don't meet that 10 gram or 100 kilogram limits of those specific chemicals. Here you go. And it's kind of funny for industrial machinery, it's pretty funny the handful of situations that are actually reportable. They're not intuitive. So you have to really go through all the chemicals and say, it's funny, this chemical, which is used in industrial machinery on and off, it's got a 10 gram reporting limit, totally different than the PTFE at 100 kilograms. So it just changes things. So that's PFAS. Now I know I'm going a little fast. It's because I have to jam PFAS steps, plastics registry steps into 1 hour plus questions. By the way, I'll speak quickly. There's webinar, any webinar we've done, you can find it online on YouTube. You can slow me down so I sound normal-ish. Well, that word wasn't normal. Anyways, better. And speaking of better, Canadian Plastics Registry. Okay, this one is, its first reporting deadline, it's a repeating one, is September 29th, 2025. And it's report plastics in your packaging and plastic products, electronics or plastic products. If you're in scope of ROHS, if you have a product that would be in scope of EU ROHS, you're like, what do you mean we're talking about the European Union? Yeah, it's funny. They use the same categories the EU ROHS uses for inclusion into scope. It's a positive list again, but basically if your electronics are in scope of EU ROHS, you're in scope of this. If you're over 1 ton of applicable plastic products. Now, if it's electronics, it's not 1 ton of plastics in electronics, it's 1 ton of electronics. Okay, so keynotes. We're always starting. Okay, breathe in, breathe out. Okay, Canadian government expectation. Year 1, good, enough. And that's what they expect out of you in year 1. Good, enough. Year 2, better. Year 3, best. Is best perfect? No. And say perfect, just best. So realize when you're looking at year 1 going, oh my goodness, I'm doing it the first time, never done it before, we have limited time. It's good enough. You want to get the right plastics in the right order of magnitudes, which is funny when you do data, oh my goodness, when we get other people's data gathering sometimes, we get it together and we're like, if you ever try to roll this up, you're going to get a completely wrong answer, and disastrously so. So keynote 1, that's note 1. Note 2, 2025 versus 2026. Residential waste. If your product or its packaging would likely end up, or some of it would end up at the bottom of the blue bin at the bottom of somebody's driveway at the end of life, it's 2025 reporting for electronics and packaging. So it includes like pharmaceuticals. Like you might sell pharmaceuticals to institutions and pharmacies, but a portion of the blister packs will end up being disposed of at home, your 2025 reporting, for that percentage that would end up at home. So it's consumer, but it's really residential waste. The blue bin would your electronic product or your packaging for electronic product or otherwise, for anything, blister packs for pharmaceuticals, would your packaging end up in the blue bin at the bottom of somebody's driveway, or at least over 1 ton a year. Institutional waste ends up at the dumpster. Like at our work, that's not our dumpster at work. We're not like a disaster zone like that. But so the blue bin at the bottom of my driveway is handled by the city, paid by our taxes. It's one waste stream. The blue bin out back of our laboratory is paid by us, and it's institutional. It's handled differently. The institutional waste is reported in 2026. So imagine you make medical devices, electronic, or packaging that would be disposed of only in institutions like hospitals. You have 2026 reporting. You make an insulin pump that goes home, and its packaging would end up in the bottom of the driveway, or at least some of it, is 2025. So if your electronic product and or packaging will almost exclusively end up in institutional waste, your 2026 report for electronics and packaging. If it'll end up at the bottom of the driveway, it's in 2025 report. So that's a key note. And the guidance, the original draft guidance, didn't get that right, but that's actually what the law says, the Section 46 notice. Consumer, blue bin at the bottom of driveway, 2025. Now, it's a professional product, but it ends up with a patient at home, and they dispose of it often at home. It's consumer, it's residential waste stream. So like your pharmaceutical, your prescription pharmaceuticals, a lot will go to nursing homes and hospitals and healthcare providers, and the blister packs will be disposed of there. But a number of the blister packs will end up also with a patient at home and get disposed of at home, and you have to report the ones that would be, or at least a percentage, that would be residential waste in 2025, and then both the residential and institutional waste in 2026. It's a repeating annual one. Consumers' first time is 2025, institutions 2026, September. So what's in scope? So for the 2025 reporting, which is for the 2024 calendar year, consumer electronics, basically it's any electronics that would be in scope of EU ROHS, they use the same categories, that would be disposed of at a household at the end of life, or a percentage of them would, including medical devices. They're in scope of this, as is monitoring control. So you have a home insulin pump, multimeter, monitoring control, they're all in scope. Consumer packaging, so the packaging that will go to the home. So your blister pack, packaging. Your box around your insulin pump, packaging. Obviously, any of the packaging with your laptop. If it's plastic, paper is not in scope. It's a 2025 reporting, September 2025 for the 2024 year. And there's a bunch of single-use plastics, which if you're in this industry, you know what they are. They're not all single-use. They're like single-use food disposable hygiene products like shavers and stuff like that. And then some single-use masks and gloves, like your COVID-type masks and gloves. That's 2025. 2026 reporting, September 2026, for the 2025 year, include professional electronics. So all electronics are in scope of EU ROHS are in scope then. You have to report both your consumer and professional, residential and institutional waste in 2026, both of them. And they're reported separately, just to be annoying. Your professional packaging. So funnily enough, imagine you make electronics, consumer electronics, appliances, say blenders, and you send them to Best Buy. We'll say in Canada or whatever, in a pallet, Best Buy breaks down the pallet and then sells the individual blenders at home. So the packaging and the polybag around the blender is residential. However, the overwrap on the pallet is institutional, it's disposed of by the business. So it's kind of a professional packaging is different. So it could be the packaging around your professional electronics, or it could be the overwrap on your consumer ones that doesn't end up in the residential. So like your pallet overwrap is professional. Apparel and textiles, clothing's in. So one of the great conversations is one entity in the apparel said, we make clothing. We don't make fabric. We don't make plastics. Polyester is the one in the symbol. Polyester is plastic. Nylon's a plastic. PVC is a plastic. Silicone is not. Cotton is not. Wool is not. Silicone's not reportable. It's a weird phenomenon about this. Which is actually kind of the funny ones is car tires, which I don't mention here because it's pointless. Car tires are in scope of 2026, but rubber is not in scope of reporting. I'm not sure what car tires are reporting in 2026. The little plastic knob, little cap that goes on the outlet, because the synthetic rubber, it's a different category and it's actually not reportable. So I don't know, the Kevlar belt? I think somebody didn't think that through. Cars, trucks, and stuff are in 2026 construction. Your Tyvek insulation in your house, your gutters, your water piping, all of that stuff. Fishing and agriculture, sure, that doesn't affect most people. And in 2026, your industrial institutional waste of any of your facilities in Canada. So if you have a manufacturing or distribution or employee, or you have a restaurant of your own, you have to report if you have over 1 ton of plastic or plastic products. So our lab has to report also, because we dispose of all the electronics we test eventually. That actually takes us over the limit in waste. In Canada, so you're not worried about the rest of the world. It's only your Canadian facility. So if you have many distribution and manufacturing operations, you'll always go over. If you just have offices, you have to have around 100 employees to push it over the limit for 1 ton a year in plastics. But this also includes like the universities, the schools, nursing homes. Everybody has to report. All the businesses, if you're over 1 ton of plastic waste. So that's separate. Everything else I've talked about is the product, import, manufacture, and sale. This is actually the waste from industrial institutional facilities, like our office has to report. In 2026, for the quickly approaching 2025 year. So we have to have a plan on how we're going to report our plastics. We get pulled over because of our electronics disposal from all our testing. But it doesn't take much bigger than us to be reportable in general. So how do we do it? So by the way, you can go on our website. It's a bit of a promo, but there's a useful thing. On our website, it's an FAQ. The draft guidance hasn't come out yet because the draft version's wrong and need to be fixed. So eventually that'll come out. The law itself is extremely difficult read. It's like do parts 1 and 3 of Schedule 2 on products in parts 3 and 5 of Schedule 5. Those aren't the real numbers, but it's that confusing. Choose your own adventure. Even the people who wrote the guidance couldn't figure out the notice because it's so convoluted. So, and an FAQ on our website, feel free to go there. It says, you are these products, you have to do this. You are these products, you have to do that. It's a lot simpler. We also have a great service. We can do plastic registry for any of your products. We also have a great approach for waste. We do a lot of modeling on waste. We know what the average employee waste in. There's a way to adjust it. So you don't have to worry about every single wrapper and so on and so forth. There's good ways to do that. So we do tons, but there's a good FAQ on our website. So if you have questions about it and you're looking at the law and you can't make heads or tails of it, go to our website. In the SEPA section, there's a really good FAQ. That is just a good reference if you need one. Like you're reading the actual Section 46 notice and you're like, this doesn't make any sense at all. Go to the FAQ we have. Okay, now I'm going to take IKEA again. Again, public information. I know nothing about their insides. So I'm going to take the Havers hanging lamp. Sure, don't know what the word means, Havers. So it's kind of neat because on their website, they have like the ceiling cord set is PVC, the hanger is acetyl plastic, the lamp holder cup is polycarbonate, including some recycled material, and the shade ring, the actually a hard piece at the end, is polyester. Yes. So we process. So this is what it is for an individual product. And trying to do this for each one of your product would be hell on earth. But we do it for representative ones. So this particular one, we looked at this one in a little bit more detail. And you can see the PVCs right there. It's got about 96 grams of PVC, which is the outer jackets, the power cord. It's got other thermoplastics, the hanger, which is acetyl plastic, and the polycarbonate in lamp holder are both other thermoplastic. Polycarbonate and POM, acetyl, actually don't have their own categories. They're in the other thermoplastic, in both thermoplastic. The shade ring is polyester, right there, 21 grams. So those are the bigger pieces. There's a few other pieces in it. The ring holder isn't on the website, which is fine. There's a ring holder at the base. It's actually polybutyl terephthalate, which is another polyester. The internal cables normally, so it's this PVC cord set. So for the cord set, we use a model, and we'll show you us using models in a moment. And the average consumer cord set that's PVC, the internal wires are cross-linked polyethylene. Cross-linked polyethylene is not low-density polyethylene, not high-density polyethylene. It's other polyethylene. That's cross-linked polyethylene. And it has quite a few grams of it because it's the internal wires of the PVC jacket. And it's a little white clip in it. There's a tiny little white clip in it that's actually nylon in the box. Not really a big deal. And then if you look really closely, it's actually got the packaging is far right. It's got a couple grams of low density polyethylene. and it's got 3/4 of a gram of PVC. It's got a PVC truss tie. So doing this for every single part is a lot of work. So you could do this the old-fashioned way and to create this. But this is what it looks like for an individual product. Now, you don't report product. At the end of the day, you're going to report home appliances, or actually in this case, lighting, and the amount of kilograms of PVC you have in lighting. So you don't care about individual. You're just going to sum your volumes up. But this is an individual product. It's about 50% plastics. The rest is usually metal, probably some glass. You do now. The way to do plastic registry is the old-fashioned way, where a lot of companies go wrong. You create a complicated plan to gather data from all your suppliers, and then try to integrate the data afterwards. At which point you're going to have to figure out that you're going to have to fix most of the data anyways. There's quite a few companies that we work for that have for other packaging reporting requirements quite a bit of data. And we get the data and we go, it doesn't survive a 5-second review. It's wildly off and incorrect. And I can actually show you your online declaration and what you say it's in there are not the same thing. So a company set up, we usually have, when somebody's gone through this huge effort, we end up having to go fix it all anyway. Like, we've been a lot easier if we did it right the first time. And to do a big complicated thing like this, like gather that level of complexity of data we just saw from our suppliers, so we had some people come from the outside saying, hey, this is actually how we do it in a typical company. Okay, if we did a plastic registry project, we have an executive committee as sponsors. We just keep them up to date like once a month. We have a steering group. We keep up to date like a weekly. And then we have an execution group of all these people contributing, actually doing the work, which have somebody probably managing the whole thing. You'll have somebody from quality, finance with an input, product management, some input from finance. There's definitely an IT element. Legal will probably some 2 cents worth in. You might have the procurement people are involved. If you have your own factories, your own process engineering. And it's funny when they did this, we're like, it's kind of, that makes sense, because we get in some of these meetings about the plastics registry, and our client has like 6 or 7 people in the meeting. We're like, how did this come about? Oh, okay. And so the person came from the outside world saying, no, this is actually perfectly normal. What they would do is to have these representatives from all these different groups, and some are actually on the working team. Some get updated, say weekly or monthly, and some get updated, at the start or key milestones. The executive committee only gets updated at sort of key milestones that you did or didn't complete it. Okay, and then you put a project together with all the different things you're going to do, and then here's all the different plans we're going to have in terms of populating the data and getting where we need third-party vendors in it, and getting them squared up to do it. And this is how we get the information from our suppliers, which may or may not be complete. And here's how we double check our work. And a lot of things have been done in parallel. This is, generally what we'd be doing. And then because we also have to build what the question is, what question are we asking, how are we delivering it to the question, and then getting buy-in of the different people, and then procurement has to run it. They have to be trained up on it. Here's our project plan. And so this is actually fairly streamlined. One thing is that, it never goes this well. We're going to write it this way, but it never goes this well. We're going to say it to be done in 20 some weeks. It's not going to be. We know, everybody knows it's not going to be done, but at least this is the way we plan. So this is the old-fashioned way to do it. And then they create a project budget defining how many hours of different headcounts they have to the questionnaire to gather the data. We use just IKEA's consumer products. We know nothing about them internally, and they probably actually have a lot of data to start with. But we'll say, imagine they have very limited data, but they're very capable and they had great communications. They said, the person outside world said, look, I mapped it through. If I was them, I would be budgeting 450 headcount days at around 173,000. And that's the old-fashioned way to do it. And it's time consuming and relatively expensive, actually. So we didn't write this. We had somebody saying, hey, we'll come to you. Imagine this is you be the project manager, and you write the project from it without all these benefits. So this is the old-fashioned way to do it. Very typical, and this is what they came up with. We didn't influence it other than giving them an education like you're getting from this webinar on the basics of what you're supposed to be doing. We have a better way to do it. Legislation allows for the average bill of materials model. So what we do is, to complete the average bill of materials, we do representative products of each family. And if it's a really high variety volume products, like say IKEA lamps, IKEA is like 389 types of lamps. And they seem to have decent public data on it, but that's a lot. And so trying to do every single lamp, but there's a lot in common. They have shades, they have shafts, they have base, they have cords. Okay, there might be a better way to do that. For these high variety ones, what we do is we don't create a model for a lamp. So for refrigerators, we create a model for refrigerators. And that's what we do for most companies. For high variety ones, we go, we're going to make models for the different components. We're going to create multiple models for the core shades, multiple models for the like the main shafts, cord set, and bases. And there'd be like 3 or 4 or 5 options of each, which makes about 20 different models. But then we make it, you can just pick and choose for each one. This one is the PVC, shade, ABS shaft, metal base, big, and it maps them together. And so for core components like power cords, we have a model already. We have lots of consumer power cord models, what the average power cord has in it, and they don't vary a lot actually. And then, and again, remember, year 1 is good enough, year 2 is better, and year 3 is best. And the idea is over the years, we'd improve the models or detail because you want to get the order of magnitudes right. And then because when we get to actually the supplier data, the order of magnitudes are not even close to right. And the plastics are wrong, and it's like even like it's not just the volumes are wrong; it's not even that plastic. So you create separate models for significant variations. The lamps, the lamp shade, we create different lamp shades. We have an ABS shade and a glass shade, and glass shade obviously is very little to report, and a polycarbonate shade, etc. And we make different ones for the shaft. And then we basically select applicable plastic registry models. In some cases, multiple. So refrigerator, it's one. And like, well, refrigerators are different size. We can make it one model that scales by mass of unit or by number of refrigerators, up to you. It's just, for us, it's just a checkbox. But we create a buffet style selection, especially for the high variety ones. High variety ones, like here's EVA base. We have a model for that. Here's the ABS base. Here's the model for that. Here's the cord set. And then we have the ability to choose how many. There's a way we didn't choose what we're doing. So they're like, okay, how do we get all the volumes together? So we choose sections. And we only do this for the high variety ones. So people's like, we make a zillion different pumps. Sweet. We can create one pump model, or we can make different models for the main options, and you just pick and choose. So this one has like EVA base, or you choose the ABS base, or by the way, these are based on real products we looked at, or you pick this is the cord set model. And then for each one of your SKUs, we just made up some stuff. You take your polycarbonate lamp, probably got some funky name, how many units you sold, what's the total weight of what you sold, and then you pull down whether they have these things. And we have it as 0 and 100%, but allows you to say, hey, it's an extra tall one, we'll choose 150%. So it has the ability to do play with sizes if you think it's relevant, but it becomes a buffet. So for each one of your SKUs, we only do this for high variety, high volume, like something like IKEA, they make a lot of different lamps, 389. It's probably a fairly strong contributor to the plastic output. But the materials are varied amongst different lamps. So we would create a smorgasbord. You just pick each one of them. They might say, hey, the supplier's already told us the PVC cord. I'm like, yeah, but 30% of the PVC cord weight is cross-linked polyethylene, so it's not quite right. So you just pick it, and you missed a few things. And this is our package, and it has packaging, and we create average packaging for different product types. And you just pick it, and it combines them together to eventually create, here's our full summary for lamps. Now, lamps is a different reporting category than kitchen appliances, fridges, so you keep them separate. Flexible packaging is reported separately than rigid packaging, which is reported separately from IT equipment, which is reported separately from lamps, which is reported separately from kitchen appliances. That's a different webinar to explain the different subcategories. So this, we're going to consolidate the lamps. And so on the far right side, so this is the full answer that you'd be summarizing based on the previous page. And these are in grams. You're really reporting kilograms. And their volumes, I'm sure, are much higher in this. But it's based on, hey, we had this many chose the EVA base, this many with the ABS base. And then they all add together, because all you care about is the kilograms of each of the categories at the end of the day. So whether you're doing it as a lamp or just how many of each lamp segment you have, and you can always choose if you really want to be special, saying this is an extra tall one, the shaft is 150% or 200% of the normal model size. Awesome, but we also have it scale against the weight of the lamp anyway, so it ends up coming out pretty darn good. And then here's the packaging they had from it. Is low density polyethylene, which would be flexible, and it's actually reported separately than the product under flexible, but this is actually what you report. So what you actually report is lamps, and then the category 2, 811211 polyester, 60 kilograms. Actually, they'd be much higher, and so on and so forth to go down. We pick some very small numbers here, but this blends it all together. And so that's how we handle a high variety. If you're just doing, hey, I do servers or whatever, we do one for the server. It's only if you have a lot of variety and it's a major contributor where we do subcomponents. So better way, using models, we use dozens of models to represent thousands of products. And it's about less than 20% of the work of a full project. Sure, it's a little more technical, a little more high-end resource, but it's less than 20% of the full projects. You're not spending $172,000 doing it. It's much less. It's actually got much better accuracy in the old-fashioned way. When we compare the two, the models actually, then we take things to test, end up way more accurate than the supplier data does, and orders of magnitude more accurate. It's funny because your suppliers are also doing this for the first time. The level of errors and misunderstanding is the sky's the limit. We find if we use the models, the accuracy is way better than the general supplier data. Supplier data saying, hey, we use pill blister packs that are PVC, PFAS blends. Awesome, we have a model for that. That's useful. Or saying, hey, my shades are polycarbonate. Awesome, we use the polycarbonate. Or I PVC cords, sure. But worrying about them trying to fill in that complicated super form on every supplier trying to blend it, not going to go well. Even if you get the data, it's just not going to go well. When we get the data, we're like, even if it's simplified data, like the old 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plastics, no, it's usually not right at all. And it's easier to work on detail and correctness in a smaller subset. If you want to fix something, trying to find something, if you try individual data sets for your 10,000 products, oh my goodness, drive you insane to try to fix things. It's a lot easier to work on subset models. We do the work and you go, oh, geez, that polyethylene looks a little bit high. And you check and you go, whoa, it is high. Or, oh, wait, it's really just this one thing. You'll find, because everything's so volume related, one little mistake just magnifies. So if you have a smaller subset, so much easier to do the corrections afterwards. Now, for extremely complex products, what about really complex products? We built a library of complex assemblies where instead of, as much as I just built that one for the lamp, we built most of the major sub-assemblies for electronics already. So if you're making a big, huge, laboratory equipment the size of your desk, or a pumping system the size of, a small room, trying to get that all together is going to be awful. So, but you're basically built out of a number of assemblies, and we make models for each assemblies. So we provide a questionnaire of the client with very specific questions. You'll have to do work. Sure, we could test the whole thing. Our lab is fantastic. Plastic registry testing. If you have a product that you're testing for anything else, for sure, add plastic registry to it. It's fantastic. Get a great answer. It's super accurate. But if you're saying, I've got this big thing, this $100,000 product, size of half the room, okay, data gathering is going to be awful and testing would work, but you don't want to do that for a $100,000 piece of equipment. So there's a questionnaire, and it's built heavily off the major plastics and the number of assemblies of each size. So it's funny, when you look at different products of the same size, what usually is the biggest difference in their declarations is the outer plastic. So when we take two tablets made by two different manufacturers, two major like iPad type tablets, and you get one and the other, the innards plastics are almost identical actually, because they're basically the same circuit boards and battery and display and antenna and all that. But the outer plastic is different, and that's actually what makes them different. So the questionnaire has a lot of good questions about what's your largest plastics. These are plastics over 1/2 of any dimension of the product. We want the biggest ones because they're going to affect significantly your declaration. Then the inside is, how many do you have of each of these assembly types? Pumps, fans, circuit boards. I'm not worried about every little ceramic, which is not even plastic, circuit board on circuit on the circuit IC. We have a mapping for that. By the way, I'm going to go over time. Apologize for everybody. There's a lot of detail we're going through. We have a mapping for everything. So we just need to know how many circuit boards you have, or what's the total weight of your circuit boards. We have models for circuit boards. You'd be amazed what weird plastics are in circuit boards on average, but fairly consistently. Do you have displays? Displays have very specific. Your display is like 9 layers of different plastics with a circuit board. Okay, so we have that. And we care about most of your biggest one and your second biggest one. Do you have cables? Awesome. What's your length of cables? Sweet. We have models for sheathed and unsheathed cables. And you end up with an answer which is pretty darn good. It's better than good enough. It's pretty darn good, actually, out of this. So this is if you have a product that's super complicated. So we just take a representative product, not doing all of your centrifuges, just do one. And if they're significantly different, we'll scale it by weight. But this is a great way to do it. Because we have models for basically everything you can imagine. These are just some examples of the different plastics in each by percentage. Because we've done, that's the nice thing about the test lab. We've been able to go through circuit boards, so much, and you'd be amazed how similar their plastics are. The epoxy is other thermoset resin, especially when a lot of the plastics are others. You'd be amazed. Other thermoplastic resins, polybutyl terephthalate is a connector material, super common. It's in the other category. It's actually probably one of the highest concentration plastics in a circuit board. Cables, your cables like are only maybe 40% PVC. They have cross-linked polyethylene in them, and they have a lot of copper. So we have a plan. So the better way is using models. We use dozens of models to represent thousands of products, which is about 20% of the work of the full project. It's way more accurate than the old-fashioned way and way faster. It's also easier to work on detail or correction. Like you get an answer at the end, you're going, well, that looks ridiculous. You can double check and be like, no, that's real. Or B, okay, I can see what the problem is. It's so much easier in a small number of things to work on. Now, reminder again, that was plastics registry, because we're at the end of time. PFAS, step one, we review the chemicals in scope for you. Do these chemicals apply to your product? Here's the questionnaire. We've already distilled where things are used. Can they possibly be in your product's reportable level? So we ask you some volume questions. So if you make electronics, your volumes do affect which PFAS we're actually worried about. Not for US TSCA, it's a bit different. US TSCA, we have a little extra level of detail. But the US TSCA reporting is also different than what most people think. You're doing US TSCA reporting, start with your output. If you haven't looked at your output yet, don't do anything. Do not do anything in US TSCA until you figure out what the output looks like, because you're going to be shocked what you're actually going to be doing. And then step two is take actions based on your reviews and your questionnaire in the first part, based on the applicable substance and application. Don't boil the ocean. Let's work on what you have to work on. Pursue those small number of applicable situations, and then you complete the reporting, whether it's simple or complex, as warranted. As I mentioned earlier, the internal anti-drip PTFE was simple. The food contacting is complex. And then optionally submit a declaration of stakeholder interest, like you have fluoroacrylics that are not listed, but they're important enough in your products, it's worth mentioning they exist in your industry. And if you don't have any of those, you submit no declarables at all. You do a declaration of non-engagement. We can help you with that too. And that's saying, we've done the work. This is why we don't have to report. You get checkbox. Your company is seen as done by Environment Canada and Climate Change. They changed the name so much. Environment Climate Change, ECCC. That's what they call them, ECCC. Environment Canada, I'll say. I'm still old school. So again, this is due January 29th. You can probably get a 3-month extension. You're trying to go year extension, they know you're just not going to work until the end anyways. Good try. So into questions. I'm sorry I'm way over time. There's a lot of materials. I'll try to get to any of your questions. There are a whole pile, dozens right now. If I don't get to your question, feel free to reach out and ask questions. Again, everybody who registered will receive a copy of the slides. There will be a recording on YouTube like our other ones, probably by next week. Good question. I thought reporting was September 29th, 2025. For PFAS, it's January 2025. For plastics, it's September. I keep remembering which one's the 25th and which one's the 29th. It doesn't really matter. Hi, is the reporting yearly or is it like once per 4 years, like CDR? For Canadian PFAS, it's Section 71. It's one time for 2023 volumes. For plastics registry, it's annual with escalating requirements each year, which I didn't really go into that much detail here. Can you speak to reducing reporting requirements for listed PFAS and an unlisted manufacturing item? Oh, yeah. So if you're not dermal contact, textiles, children's products, you're in the other category. You have to do the simple one, which I mentioned earlier, which is mostly this is the product type and we have it, not volumes or uses. Do commercial use products have simplified reporting in general if it's not dermal contact? Professional products may have dermal contact. So if your PTFE is in a hand contact situation in its intended use, not manufacturing or repair, in intended use, then you might have complex. There's a couple chemicals that have 10-gram reporting. They're really common in machinery. There's a couple lubricants. They have a 10-gram reporting, and they're always complex because they're in the 10-gram groups. They're always complex. So machinery often has quite a few simplified reporting, but then a couple complex. We're resin suppliers, the raw material for articles. We do not know where our product ends up. Could it be food contact? Might not be. Okay, if it's a resin as a chemical, you're reporting as a chemical. So you'll almost always have the complex reporting. So you won't have to worry as much it comes in, you're going to be in scope and you're going to be doing the complex version, which usually isn't too bad. Does that 100 kilograms limit apply to the total of all products sold into Canada, or is the limit for each product type? It's of the PFAS, so not the product, for PFAS reporting. For plastics registry, it's for the entire category, so IT equipment or appliances. Their weights are based, the 1 ton's based in the entire category. So it's and then for Canadian PFAS, it's not just sold, it's imported or manufactured either. So it's the 100 kilogram limits for importer or manufacturer, and that's for it's for PTFE, not the product it's in. So it's the chemical. For plastic registry, it's for the product. It's 1 ton of kitchen appliances. So it's a little bit different. What are the enforcement mechanisms? Any risks of goods being stuck in customs? It's Environment Canada, so they have officers with badges. They're not normally customs related. They're very much fine related. They have officers' badges. Most of their enforcement is fines. They can take it up a notch. They have real enforcement powers. It's not like Health Canada, which supposedly does, but doesn't. Environment Canada's got very strong enforcement powers. Mostly they'll harass you first to finish it, but they can punish you as much as they feel like. They're like the US EPA. They have a lot of powers. They may or may not use them. To clarify your interpretation, Canadian PFAS, that the PFAS subs reporting thresholds are applied on a manufactured item basis. Oh, I just lost speakers. Hopefully everybody can still hear me. It is per chemical. It's not in the individual item. It's the overall 100 kilograms of PTFE in manufactured items. The question asked is really long and complicated. If the products are imported for the company use, lab supplies do report this packaging as well. Own use, normally no. However, if it's part of your distribution operations, yes. The old-fashioned way, perfect. Laugh, yep. It's the best way to put it. Because basically, somebody come in and budget it like the old-fashioned way and get to see what it looked like. Are the PFAS lists 1, 2, and 3 cumulative amounts for the manufactured product if it's both types of PFAS? It's actually for the individual chemical. So their lists 1, 2, and 3 in Canadian PFAS are separate. So they all have, there's no substance overlap, I believe, for any of them. So it's whether that substance meets its reporting limit of 10 grams or 100 kilograms. Regarding the plastics registry, how does the reporting obligation convey to distributors who may be importing thousands of diverse products containing plastics? Assuming the obligation is passed, the exporter must convey the report to the distributor. So normally, the plastics registry is handled at the brand owner. So the brand owner is responsible if they have an entity in Canada. So if you're importing it, but they have a sales office in Canada, they're responsible. They might need your help with volumes. If you're importing and they have no legal presence in Canada, the importer is responsible. You're going to need the data from the manufacturer, and they can actually report as a foreign supplier in a way. But when you're a distributor for manufacturers that have no presence in Canada, the importer is required. Otherwise, it's normally the manufacturer, brand owner that handles it. Does Section 71 apply to products manufactured in Canada for the Canadian market? Yes, it's manufactured and imported. Now, the ones that are manufactured in other countries, yes, it actually, for export, it does count. The reporting is you end up reporting the amount of PFAS manufactured and then how much is placed in the market. Nope, that's actually plastics registry. Plastics registry accounts how much you manufacture versus how much you place in the market are in the data. PFAS for export, I'm not 100% sure. I believe it is, but I'm not actually 100% sure if export's included. That's a really good question. I have to look that up. Are circuit boards for industrial products included in the scope? For PFAS, yes. Plastic registry, yes, if they're inside a product. However, if a circuit board is a component, it means sold on its own and would not be under scope of EU or OHS because it has to be integrated. No, it's not in scope of the plastics registry. Plastic registry is only. So I have other webinars. If you want to go over scoping, that have a lot more detail. It's hard for me to point at things in the questions about scoping. Is PFAS only for Canadian companies importing or for all companies selling? Yeah, it's manufactured and imported. I believe that includes exported, but I'm not 100% sure. If our products do not fit in the category listed in the plastics registry, do we not need to report those? Correct. So if your electronics are fixed installation, they're not in scope. If your cars, you're not in scope until 2026. So yes, but your packaging might be. So your packaging is separate. Whether or not whatever's in it, the packaging is separate. What is the product manufacturer and importer in Canada responsible for reporting?
PFAS, and plastic registry. I'd have to identify which is which. Normally, one of them is definitely the brand owner, if they exist in Canada. Otherwise, it's the importer, which I believe is the plastic registry. PFAS, I believe, is the importer. But if you manufacture in Canada, then you manufacture in Canada. Plastic registry, I believe, and so there are other webinars, and since they're slightly different, I don't want to get them wrong, that actually go into it. And I have lots of reference slides, none of which are up right now. I believe plastic registry, I believe, is brand owner if they exist in Canada. If they don't exist in Canada, it's the importer. PFAS is the manufacturer or importer. If I import formulated products, is the packaging captured under the PFAS survey? Yes. Will you have PFAS in your packaging? Maybe. Definitely pharmaceuticals do. In sometimes in the seal, but also some of the blister, a lot of blister packs are PVC, PVDC, but some of them are PVC, PCTFE, polychlorinated tetrafluoroethylene. So they would be in scope for PFAS reporting. Is aero included in transportation? Generally, no. It's almost all road. There's specific listings. I think aerospace almost exclusively is not positively included under transportation. I think it's just cars and trucks and tractors and road and field. I don't believe any aerospace is in the plastics registry transportation section. So I didn't get to all the questions. I got to a lot. Some little bit long questions I didn't get to completely. Sorry I didn't have the reference slides up for scoping. Scoping are a lot of the scopes of these are in previous webinars. With the limited amount of time, I didn't put up too much on scoping other than the plastic registry timelines. Hopefully people found this useful. It was very fast, a lot going on. Feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to help. Again, everybody register, receive a copy of the slides, and hope to talk to everyone again soon.